Hi, everyone. I wanted to remind you of a must read. This is a book that you have to have on your bookshelf. It is called The Necktie and the Jaguar by Greer. He is able to help you make important decisions, give you some guidance on which path to take, and you get to learn how he tapped into the wisdom and power of the unseen worlds for guidance and inspiration. I had the opportunity to interview him, and he was a lovely guest on the Path 11 podcast, episode 343. Check it out, listen to the podcast, go buy the book. Again, it's The Necktie and the Jaguar by Greer. To find out more information, go to his website, carlgreer.com. That's spelled CarlGreer.com. Today's podcast episode is sponsored by the Reconnective Healing Global Community. I don't know if you guys remember, but back in 2020, we released an episode with Dr. Eric Pearl and Jillian Fleer about Reconnective Healing. He was a chiropractor who was working in his practice in Los Angeles, and his patients started to report that they were having these healings just with his hands being near them without him actually touching them. So he went on to research and try to find out what this universal wisdom was behind what was happening, and he developed the Reconnective Healing process. Their website is thereconnection.com, and they are offering an online level 1 class called The Portal to awaken your own healing ability and to learn how to do this. There's over 8 hours of interactive content where you will learn to interact with energy, light, and information to experience lasting knowingness, peace, and love without limitations. They gave us a coupon code to give to all of our listeners. It is Path2Portal. We're going to put that in the show notes, and that's 25% off of the Portal online level 1 course. I hope you guys enjoy. Let me know if you take it. Send me an email. Would love to know how the course works for you. Hi, and thanks for tuning in to the Path 11 podcast. I am your host, April Hanna. At the Path 11 podcast, we are here trying to deliver leading-edge research on consciousness, healing, and metaphysics. And just like you, we are trying to answer the big questions about life. Who are we? Why are we here? And what is our purpose? We hope by listening to our podcast, it will make each day you live on Earth a little easier to understand. And now for today's podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Path 11 podcast today. We have a very interesting show for you. We are going to be talking about mediumship and also animal communication. My guest today is Susan Allen Medium. She is an internationally renowned psychic medium and animal intuitive. Connecting with spirit, Susan consistently delivers messages with gentleness, compassion, warmth, and wit, providing healing, peace, and closure to her clients. Having spent decades cultivating her innate spiritual gifts, Susan draws from her experience as a Reiki Master, Ho'oponopono practitioner, author, and life coach. Susan works with individuals and groups from celebrities to doctors, professional athletes to moms, families, and more. Susan Allen Medium, welcome to the Path 11 podcast.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Be here.
Yeah, same here. So I sometimes like to tell my audience how I find my guests, especially a guest like you, because sometimes, I have great relationship with publicists and I get a lot of people who have authored books, but every now and then I'm on our Instagram, page on social media, and I'm just scrolling and randomly kind of looking at the feeds. And then usually when I get into the space, I'm always like, Spirit, is there anyone that I should bring on my show? And I like to randomly find people that way through social media. And you are one of those people. I saw your Instagram page. There was something on there about soul speaks, animal communication. And I was thinking, okay, I need this woman on the Path 11 podcast. I don't know why, but I'm going to invite her. And you accepted my invitation.
I love that. They say we find our tribe. So that's so cool. There's no mistake.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your background. I mean, how did you come into mediumship? I'm sure you probably have a similar story like many mediums, where you probably had this innate intuitive ability when you were younger and maybe lost it for a little while, came back in, and then it started to grow. And then you probably couldn't ignore it and then had to make it your profession.
Well, it kind of happened like that. It was a lot of bumps in the road, let me tell you. the path to mediumship for me was a lot of trauma.
Hmm.
And I was always like a very anxious little kid. The anxiety was, and it was probably spirit coming in. I was clairaudient, and I I don't remember like seeing dead people. Although my brother says on many accounts he'd walk into the room and he'd ask me who I was talking to, and I'd say the beautiful lady. So I don't have that memory. I don't have like a lot of early memories. The only memories I really have is the feelings I had when I was around animals, and then the calmness that would come over me around animals, and how I was kind of fearless around animals. I mean, I remember a woman that did well, it wasn't that recently, it was like 2 years ago. I really wanted to talk to a woman that was instrumental in helping the poaching crisis in Africa, because when I came into my animal work, the poaching crisis was at its peak. And I was trying to help and interview people. And she was worried I'd walk up to an elephant in the wild. And I'm like, I'm not crazy, you know? I mean, there was always this innate ability when I'd walk into the woods or animals would come to me. And it was kind of like, I always felt like I was in a Disney movie when I was around animals. And it was just that way when I was little. When there was crises in my house, my dad would always take me to where animals were, you know, or he would get me a dog, or, I had that kind of parent. So at least somebody kind of understood me.
Yeah. So, how did you begin to know that you needed to do mediumship readings for the public and people? And, when did that kind of begin for you?
That's a wonderful question. I had no idea I would be doing interviews and being in the public eye. What happened is I was doing animal readings for many, many years under a different name because I was scared to leave the day job. And then one day a dead person started to appear in a photo of my dad and I, and it happened to be my client's father. And it was with such gentleness and ease. And I wasn't scared, because I would think, oh my God, if there were dead people in my house, I would just lose it. It was a very calming feeling. I think that they knew, the dead people, that was how they would need to communicate with me if they wanted me to be a conduit to help. And that's kind of how it happens. And a friend of mine said, well, if you're not going to do it, I'll get you on my show. And that's kind of how this whole, me getting on, Zooms and people finding me and calling me for readings. It's kind of really how it started. And then the public platform stuff, when I just let go and let spirit flow through, it was fearlessness. There was more fear getting on a New York City subway and going to work in the morning than, doing mediumship for me. Because I think I was always on the other side in some weird way. I was always reading spiritual books at age 10. I think the book, The Road Less Traveled, was one of the first books I read. Dr. Scott Peck. I just related more to the spiritual work and stories of mysticism that my Italian grandfather used to tell me with the Catholic saints. I'm a recovering Catholic, so I'm not into Catholicism, but I think the awe and the wonder of when I was a little kid really opened me up to spirit work.
Yeah. I also come from an Italian family, Italian Catholic family as well, and can completely relate to that. And what was your day job? What did you do?
I've had 50,000 careers. I'm not kidding. I just couldn't figure out. I had a big career, and I left it because I would be in a career for 1 year and get bored and leave, because I really couldn't find myself, or it just wasn't, it was soul crushing.
Mm-hmm.
It was absolutely soul crushing. So I had a lot of different careers. I mean, I think my first career was, I did makeup in New York. I didn't do hair, but I did makeup for film and TV, and I loved it. And I did, a lot of special effects makeup.
Cool.
And I think the first director I worked with on a student film, and where he became really famous out in LA, but I never stayed in touch with that. I would just shift from one career to another, from one career to another. And The good thing about that with mediumship is you have this whole breadth of work
Yeah.
that spirit would use to help bring me to the people I read for.
Yeah. Makes sense.
That is really interesting. And I took some classes, and I remember a class I took with Mavis Patilla. She said, mediums, it's good to read a lot of history. That's not my jam. To have that in your Rolodex. And it's just like, when we were speaking earlier about animals, I didn't really know anatomy of animals. So when I started out as an animal communicator, that would have helped. But I would just go to the area in the body and I would say, this is where something's happening. And then I'd be able to describe that area. It's not like, that I have this huge plethora of anatomy or historical background, but I feel like the people that come to me, sometimes they draw on the many careers that I've had.
Very nice. Yeah.
That's what spirit uses as the toolkit. I'll say that's my toolkit.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes complete sense. Now, are you based out of New York City?
No, I'm in LA now. I've been living in LA about 25 years. So
okay. All right. Yeah. Because I was just going to ask, we just had Ida come through and New York City kind of got squashed with all that rain and flooding. And oh my God, it was horrible. So if you were still down there, I was going to say, how's everything? Because clearly you're able to podcast and there's no water in your house.
Since I've been here, it's all the flooding happened back there. And it's kind of, when I lived there, it was never that bad. It was just snowstorms that would get us, but not floods. It's unusual. But yeah, there's a lot of unusual things happening in the world right now.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, this is kind of going off a little bit of topic, but what was your draw to go to the West Coast? Because I feel like I have interviewed so many people. I think we're over like 350 now. And there are some East Coast people that say like they just needed to go to the West. And there's like different energy in both parts. And I forget, I had this one conversation with this woman and she was kind of talking about the different frequencies of the East Coast and the West Coast and why she was drawn. But I'm just curious to ask you that question too. What was the draw to go?
It's actually the beginning of everything for me. When I was 15, my dad was a high school teacher in Staten Island, and he had the whole summer off, and he was coming out to LA. He had a woman that they were interested in each other. And he said, Susie, that was my name, my family called me, why don't you come with me? Well, I didn't want to leave California. And I remember I was 15. This is what really got me into metaphysics and the power of our thinking and thought. At 15, my dad took me to Marina del Rey, California, and it was a bustling wharf. Fisherman's Wharf was bustling. And I looked down, because I'm from Brooklyn. I look over the railing into the water, and there's tons of pelicans hanging out with seals on buoys. And I was just like, oh my God, I think I died and went to heaven. Mm-hmm. And I had it in my head that one day I would buy a house in Marina del Rey. I would have to live in Marina del Rey. And I kept that in the forefront of my mind. And it was something that I was on purpose about. I remember not wanting to come home. My mother was completely pissed off because she planned a Sweet 16 party for me. And she's like, you got to come home and help me do this. And I'm like, cancel the party. I mean, what girl doesn't want a Sweet 16 in a disco?
Right.
Disco. It was the disco days. And I didn't want to go home. And it was a big problem. And when I went home, I really went into, I think that was like one of the first dark nights of the soul for me. I went into a very deep depression. And I was trying to replicate the things I was doing in LA, which was, I was playing tennis. I'd take my tennis racket and I'd hit tennis balls. It was very hard for me to leave LA. And I was only 15. And I knew one day I would live here. And fast forward years later, my mother passed away when I was in my 20s. And I got married 6 months after her departure. I had no idea. The guy was a great guy. And he's still a good friend. But it was kind of like, it was one of those things. It was like the next step for me in my life. And I got him to get us to move here. And we came out. I wasn't doing animal communication. I ended up with a career in the art world. And it was funny because I was always helping other people. I was always like helping others with their career. And I was representing painters. And I remember I had it in my head that I had to get a house in Marina Del Rey. And I just worked and worked and worked till I found a house in a place that only 350 houses existed.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't know how I bought it. I had no money. But I bought a house in Marina Del Rey, and it was like I couldn't even buy a lipstick for years because I was mortgage poor. But I manifested that, and I'm a really big. I mean, that's my purpose. My on purpose in life is to always turn this over to something bigger than me, something higher than me, to help people understand the power of our thoughts lead to what shows up. That's kind of what is a real passion for me, besides the mediumship.
Yeah. Oh, I love that story. And when you think about it, like even statistically, right? Like 1 in 350 houses
Yeah.
became yours.
Yeah.
And,
Everything else was condos.
wow. And you're in that house today. Same house?
No, I live in a different house, but
Okay.
yes.
Still amongst 350?
No, I live on a horse property with no horses, but I'm surrounded by neighbors' horses.
Oh, lovely.
And I can see them, and we can have horses here. We just haven't geared up today yet. I'm so busy. Unless I have somebody else, like I was thinking of running a rescue ranch here and having other people's animals here. It's the big picture, that is, the totally big end game that I want to make happen.
Yeah, horses are really phenomenal. I haven't worked a lot with them, but in the psychotherapy field, equine therapy, and, there's a lot of programs out there to help veterans that are struggling with PTSD. And I know a lot of people when I was living in Saratoga Springs, New York, huge racehorse community. You have people that are picketing it and other people that are just like horses everywhere in Saratoga.
I had an aunt and an uncle that lived in Saratoga.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're beautiful. They're huge. I was near one for the first time like a couple months ago, and it was the closest I had ever been to a horse. And, just hearing stories about them and their personalities and their intelligence, it's really kind of fascinating. I'd like to have more of a relationship with horses.
You should come out here and I'll take you where horses are, because that's kind of how the work started for me. I was working on a horse, and when I say working, I couldn't ride anymore. I needed a surgery. And I started to brush him, groom him every week because I couldn't ride. And this went on for a year. And he started communicating with me. And I thought I was cuckoo, cuckoo. And I was like, if there's cameras at this ranch, they are not going to let me back because I'd be crying. And he was teaching me healing. So that was before I became a Reiki Master. I was using my hands and thought to help this horse with his legs. And I would go up every week and work on him. And he would tell me things that only the trainer knew. And when I would tell them this, they would say, yes, that's true. That's true. It's really interesting. That's kind of how it started before I even took a class in animal communication. That was, something that was self-taught, with the spirit, my spirit guides, I guess, and how I was going to be used here to help animals, because that's kind of how my whole business started. And I started to journal everything he would say to me. And the woman that was leasing him, I met her in the parking lot and I said, I'd like to read this to you. And I read it to her, and she took $150 cash out of her pocket and she shoved it in my hands. And I was like, wow, okay. And she was, very moved by what he told me. So that was kind of like how this started. Not that I was motivated by the money, because I never thought I'd be doing this. I was more motivated by, wow, like this is really happening. And believe me, I was so in disbelief for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Because my process was I wanted to give really good readings. So I would meditate for 20 minutes, and then I would journal for 30 minutes, and I'd be on the phone with the person for another hour.
Wow.
So it was a very long process, and I still would get very nervous. But I knew that I wasn't doing it because I needed money, because I had a career.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing it because I absolutely loved it.
Mm.
I didn't love my career, by the way, but it was, it was something I was good at, and I was selling real estate here. So I didn't love it, but I was good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And what was that horse's name, by the way?
Leo.
Leo. Oh, that's my cat's name. Yeah.
My cat's name is Leo now.
Uh, See, there you go. Hi, everybody. I wanted to just take a quick moment to tell you about a beautiful divination deck of cards that you can get your hands on. My friend, Molly Mandelberg, spent 2 years traveling the world while writing and illustrating the Wild Hearts Rise Up Oracle deck. This inspired pep talk deck has some serious magic inside. Pulling a card a day from this deck will encourage you to bring your dreams to life, to allow that idea tapping you on the shoulder to finally manifest into physical reality. It's sassy, insightful, and potent. The link to check it out is in the show notes of this episode. Just click on there. It's going to bring you right to the Oracle deck. And again, it's Wild Hearts Rise Up Oracle deck. So, can you talk a little bit more to let's kind of go into the foundation of mediumship and kind of where you come from, how you see mediumship and the trust aspect of it. And then maybe we'll kind of move the conversation into how one can communicate with animals. And if you notice that there's a difference between animal communication and human communication in spirit form. So, how do we really trust that a medium is really getting what it is that they're getting? Because in this day and age, you can and believe me, I've heard people say this before, and I'm like, if you only knew how busy people are in this field, we don't have time to Google your name and look for information about you on Facebook or, this, that, or the other thing. But sometimes I think there's a curiosity with mediumship, but also a mistrust and a little bit of skepticism for some people going into it, especially if it's their first time.
Yeah. I would definitely say get a referral for a medium from somebody who's had an experience, but not all experiences are the same. I had a mediumship reading, and I felt like I was exhausted after the reading. So, but my friend had a reading with her, and she was amazing from my friend. So every experience is different. Usually with mediumship, I consider it an art form. I don't consider it a perfect science.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I read is both evidential, but also very healing.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is how do you trust what you get? As a medium, I would say that I just go into a space and a zone that feels different physically to my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't ever remember my readings. As far as looking people up, I think I'm so hard on myself, and I'm such a skeptic. I've never looked anybody up. I've looked people up after a reading, to be honest with you, because I had a reading with a woman, and she found me on Instagram because I asked her, how'd you find me? Because I was so blown away. But I had a reading with a woman, and a man came through for her, and he was in her band. And he said that they traveled on a bus to work, that they worked together, but I wasn't connecting dots. I just was giving what I got. And she said, yes, we traveled to work on a bus. I thought that, they didn't have cars and they were going to going to a facility together. And he was giving me a lot of messages, and he was coming through in real time with real talk. And she said, you sound like him. And that's exactly what he would say. And then he said to me, she's going to do films and she's going to be very famous. And she said to me, I'm already famous. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I looked her up, and she's a 5-time Grammy Award winning songwriter. And she called me again a second time. So it's kind of like that, where I just go into another zone. I would, for me, if I looked somebody up on the internet, I would feel terrible about myself. And it's for me to turn to this business, at, later in life and use this as my profession. I feel as if like, why do that? Like there's so many other things I could do to make a living.
Yeah.
Me, it's all about the authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this field of work has a lot of really talented, authentic people who are really have ethics and morals, with the work and really see it as, like sacred. And then unfortunately, there are some people out there. I recently ran into one and it was like, wow, I can't believe this person is actually charging money and saying that they're doing what they're doing. And it kind of shocked me a little bit. And maybe that's because I, work with so many authentic people here on the podcast and really see, the work that they do, or I've had an opportunity to take a class with them and like they're the real deal, and then to run into someone that it felt like that they were kind of scamming and had an opportunity to see their skills or their gifts. And I was like, oh my God, no way. I can't believe this. So I think it's important. And unfortunately, sometimes people in your field have to work even harder at credibility sometimes, because of that, because there are people in the field that are just really charging exorbitant amounts of money and not really doing evidential mediumship. And it's like, oh, they just wanted you to know, your dad wants to know, that they love you very much and they miss you and they're sorry for whatever. It's like anybody can do a mediumship reading like that, but
Facts. And those are the ones that unfortunately give us a bad name. But I don't like to talk about people in my field. I really don't, because for me, it's gossiping and it brings down my vibration.
yeah.
But I know exactly what you're saying. And it's a very, very difficult thing. That's why I say get a referral.
Yeah. Word of mouth, have somebody that experienced.
Word of mouth is most of my business.
Yeah. And how are you able to differentiate the difference between your own voice and the voice of spirit coming through? What does that feel like for you?
Well, my own voice is more the psychic voice. I think that if I go into psychic and I make a prediction, the spirit voice, I wonder, that's a good question. I just think I feels different and the communication is different when it's spirit. I really do work to keep my readings spirit, the channeling. The thing that takes me out of the channeling and makes it more difficult is when people are asking ask a lot of questions. There's always time for questions after an evidential mediumship reading, but you get one or two people. Seriously, it's only the one or two. Is he going to call me? Is he going to, that kind of thing. And then it makes me feel like I'm not a gypsy. I'm not a fortune teller.
Right.
Let's go with what spirit, but people need that immediate good feeling. I try to bring that. That's a healing part of what I do. I try to help people with the grounding and the feeling better about themselves. Not that I'm telling somebody, you're so wonderful. It's coming from spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I get evidential messages for the person from their departed loved ones or their spirit guides. And people say, well, who are you talking to? I kind of think it's a collective unconscious of love, because I think only love can heal, not me.
Yeah.
It's love. Love is a healer. It's not me, it's love. And it's love from spirit and it's love from their guides that come in. I had a reading yesterday and the woman's mother was right there. And I said, your mother's telling me your voice needs to be heard. You can't constantly close down. And it was, she was dating somebody and he had become a born again Christian while they were dating and was telling her that she isn't Christian. She's not a Christian woman. It's like all this heavy duty dogma that this woman was going through, and she was in love with the guy.
Mm.
So, that kind of was a fight with her within herself. It was really hard on her, but her mother came through and said, you have a voice that needs to be heard. She was kind of squashing who she wanted to become, who this man wanted her to be. So the messages are very healing, and they have nothing to do with me.
Right.
I'm getting this from their people. And I say to them, your friends and family and loved ones will come in to help you. I push myself out of the way to
Hmm.
help me get the message to you. Because I'm just meeting these people on Zoom for the first time. How would I know? I don't even need to see them because I did readings by phone. I never used Zoom. I mean, I did animal readings by phone for 11 years. So it's
Right.
it's wonderful to see a beautiful face and to see
Mhm.
somebody moved by something I say. That's like the most beautiful thing. And why I put myself in this vulnerable state to do this work is to be able to help people.
Yeah. Beautiful. Now, is it different when you're communicating with animals than when you're communicating with humans? So, can you talk a little bit about the animal communication?
I don't think it's different. I talk to an animal the same way I would talk to a person.
Okay.
Um, the animals, have, you know, everybody has a different opinion on their work or what they do. But I feel like an animal soul is the same personality as a person. They're intelligent. They've probably incarnated in a human at least once. That's kind of like a very controversial, but I've been told that by some animals. And it feels like the same spirit to me. However, you know, animals like babies they're a little bit lighter. They're
Mhm.
not, their soul is a little bit lighter,
Yeah.
not as heavy as, but I shouldn't really say that. Like when I talk to spirits that have crossed over, their souls are light. So it's sometimes easier to talk to an animal. It's
Mhm.
sometimes easier. It doesn't mean it's harder to talk to a dead person, but it sometimes could be easier.
Yeah. And do you also work with animals who are alive? Like, when you were working with Leo the horse and he was giving you information, you were healing him. Do you do work on animals that maybe are having some sort of sickness or, a client is calling because they're really worried about their animal and would like information on how to best help?
Yes. And I have worked on sick animals. I have healed some animals. It's kind of like I could, I go as far as what spirit will provide for me.
Hmm.
Really up to spirit and how they work through me to help the animal. But I've gotten, the frantic calls, my dog's sick. What do you think? I've gotten the end of life calls. I do a lot of end of life, like towards the end of their lives. And people do need support during that time. So people do call me a couple of times before they decide to euthanize. I've worked directly with veterinarians that can't figure it out. I had a woman years ago come to me and said, my vet, she's in Silver Lake. I said, what's her name? I didn't even know the vet. She goes, she said that you're amazing. I know, I never even talked to her. But I guess the woman on some level might have believed what I was saying was true because she sent another patient or, client to me. And that was kind of when I took my only one and only animal communication class. There was a veterinarian in the class and she called me for a reading. And that was kind of the start of my business. I started my business with testimonials
Oh,
and
wow.
she's still a dear friend.
That's awesome. And is there a theme with animals that you tend to get maybe at end of life or maybe even when they are living? But is there kind of like a consistent message in the animal world that they're trying to relay to their human parents?
Yeah, they're better with death than we are.
Okay.
They're a lot better at death. Like I think we suffer and we think we shouldn't euthanize them, or we think, we should do chemotherapy and surgeries. And, no animal over, 6 years old really wants to go through that. So I think we keep our animals here longer than we need to, because on some level, there are children, you know, they
Yeah,
become our children.
absolutely. All right. Well, let's see what else here with animal communication that I wanted to ask you. When they are communicating in spirit, do you also find a theme of the memories that they would like their owners to know, or like, what are some of the messages that animals tend to bring back to their own owners after they've transitioned?
Well, that's a twofold question. Like I always say to people, when your animal first crosses, there's so much grief. Like, I mean, I even have my own grief. Here I'm doing this work, and my dog Rosie was the one who really brought this into my life, because it was my want of wanting to be more communicative with her, not even realizing I was already doing it. That really brought, I say that she reminded me who I really was. That's kind of what animals do, and healing animals do, or soul pets do, that come in for a very specific time and then leave. But mostly what they want us to feel and do is joy, and remember what you did with them, the funny memories. Just like dead people, they want you to remember the fun times. At Christmas, this woman came to me, and her mother came in, and the mother showed me a fruitcake. Those disgusting nail order fruitcakes.
Oh, yeah.
And then my mother and grandmother would live for their fruitcake. It was like, oh, anyway, no offense to people that love those fruitcakes. But she came in and showed me a fruitcake. And I said, why would your mother be showing me a fruitcake? Okay. And the woman started cracking up. And she said, we just found my mother's fruitcake in the downstairs freezer. As an Italian woman, the downstairs freezer.
Yes.
So it's another refrigerator and freezer in the basement. And it had to be 30 years old. And she was cracking up because she said it still tasted good. And we were laughing about it. We took a bite of Mom's fruitcake that was like 30 years old. And I talked about that in my newsletter, and my client emailed me and she said, I can't believe they tasted it after. I can't believe. So that's like, that's kind of a funny memory. And that is how spirit wants us to remember them, because they're released. Animals and people, they're doing everything they want to do. They're going to Italy, they're traveling, they're playing games, they're painting, they're doing everything that they really wanted to do or couldn't do here, or continue to do over there what they've started here.
Interesting. Yeah. And, when you said earlier that some animals have incarnated into humans or have had human lives, I don't see that too far-fetched, because I have heard humans say, I know I was a dog in a past life, or I know I was a cat, or I know I was this type of animal. So it makes sense. I mean, we're consciousness. So if we want to choose an animal body or we want to choose a human body, I'm sure we're allowed to do that.
I'm going to go back to something you said before. I really have a hard time when people would, say to me, I went to this person and she said, I was this and I was that, and I did this in a past life. And I'm like, is any of this relatable? Like, did you do your own past life regression? Like, I'm very skeptical myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard for me to believe all that stuff myself. So, I like a little bit of evidence mixed with a little bit of woo-woo. That's kind of like how I want to be read.
Right.
Now, I have more ability to open up to, a healer or somebody when they would read me, if they brought in some, wow, how would they know that kind of, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That is my preference when I go see a medium or a psychic.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, same here. And I've only had maybe a handful of readings in my lifetime, maybe a total of 10, maybe 10 different mediums that, since I've been a teenager up until about now. And yeah, there's a clear difference with evidential mediums that I've experienced and the way that I feel after a session like that. And
very lifted.
Yes. And I also had a mediumship reading with I witnessed one at a gallery reading of this woman. It sounds like a little bit of what you had done with the feedback that your client had given you that really took on the personality of the deceased loved one. And it was really fascinating to watch because she read about 7 different people in the audience. And it was like, it was like she was shape-shifting, like she was really becoming these people, and it was like phenomenal. And I've had one session like that with a really talented medium, and it really felt like I was in communication with my deceased loved one.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
the language that she was
Yeah.
using. Yeah. The personality that was coming through. It wasn't just like you, Susan Ellen medium, giving me this information. It was like this person's personality started to come through the person. I was like, whoa, this is like unlike anything I've ever experienced before. It was really cool.
I remember I read for a girlfriend, and I was saying, this fireman's coming in, and she's like, yeah. And I said, he passed at Christmas. She said, yeah. I didn't know any of this. That's how private she was. And it was a guy that she knew for like 30 years, and she was still in contact with him. And he had passed, he was a first responder in 9/11. And he told me that he was a hero. And he absolutely was. He picked a cop up by her utility belt, tiny little female officer, and he pulled her under a car when the debris started falling. So I love that because she had never told me about the firemen. I love that. It also, they say it also depends on the sitter. I have experienced some people that, come in and they're very closed down, and sometimes it's harder. I become very exhausted after the reading because I have to work so much harder, and I keep going up and up and up,
Yeah.
It definitely should be an experience. I know my own experience with mediumship. I saw the same medium 55 times over 10 years because I felt like I was in heaven after. Like I would listen to my tape, and I wasn't even aware that I was basically getting my PhD in mediumship. I was really, I read very similarly to him. He's funnier than me, but I read very similarly. And it was very interesting because nobody made fun of me. I was in full blown real estate, and I would use him as I would say, my business consultant. And one of my very last readings with him, and then I ended up becoming a medium. He gave me some advice in real estate, and I said, no, that's not going to happen. And he said, no, you should try. Your dad's saying he's going to help you. And I did it. And I think I made enough money, way more than to pay for all his silly sessions with me. So it's like, not that they were silly, but that I would think like, why am I going to a medium 3 or 4 times a year? Like he never brought my mother in once, but yet the information he brought in was so healing and important.
Right.
And that's really, and then I found out my mother probably didn't like him. So I realized that, there's always a reason why we do these sessions. We may not consciously know the reason, like you didn't know why you called me or how you found me on Instagram, but there's always a reason. And that's kind of a process I always trust. I trust that process. That there's something that I need here, or I need to hear this. There's always one nugget of something that you give out.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if it was my Italian grandmother, Grandma Adeline, who was a Leo, by the way. August 19th was her birthday, that she probably was like, get this Italian New York City woman on here. Because my grandmother lived in the city too. She lived in, I think Manhattan. They lived in Manhattan. She would tell all these stories, like it just sounded like such a beautiful community back in that day, living in the city, and everybody's doors would be open in the apartment buildings, cooking, this, that, and the other thing. So if there's anyone as one of my spirit guides kind of tapping on my shoulder, I think it would probably be her that kind of bridged the connection a little bit between us.
How lovely.
Yeah. Well, how do people find out where you are, how they can get a hold of you, and how they can have a session with you?
My website, SusanAllenMedium.com, and sign up for my newsletter because we do giveaways, and I occasionally do sales, but we have events, a lot of events coming up.
Great. And are you doing like Zoom gallery readings?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Wonderful. Okay. So check it out. We will have her website in the show notes and let her know that you heard this interview from Path 11 so she knows that you're an awesome Path 11 listener from the Path 11 podcast. So Susan Ellen Medium, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you, and I'm glad we got a chance to fit in some conversation about the animal communication because I find that fascinating as an animal lover myself.
Beautiful. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Thank you. And thank you everyone again for tuning in, for listening. Remember, you can always rate our podcast. If you'd like to watch this, you can head on over to path11tv.com where we have the video recordings of the podcast for free. You can also subscribe for our free trial to get some of the other videos that are there with our subscription site. But I hope you all just have a lovely day. Give your animals an extra big hug and kiss, play with them, have fun with them this week after you listen to this podcast. So take care, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's show. If you haven't already, please subscribe and rate and review the Path 11 podcast in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, this podcast is made possible by our sponsor, Path 11 TV. Visit path11tv.com to start a 7-day free trial and start streaming over 100 hours of exclusive video content on consciousness, healing, and life after death. That's path11tv.com, and be sure to use coupon code podcast30 to take 30% off your annual membership. Start satisfying your spiritual curiosity with a membership to Path 11 TV today. Bye for now.